It's live.
Uh, Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Destiny Movie Night Hangout. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm here with Marlon. Hi, Marlon.
Hey, Mike. Glad to be here.
Awesome to have you here. So, the movie we're looking at tonight is Fast Food Nation. Marlon, why don't you give us a little synopsis about the movie for those who haven't watched it that might be tuning in today?
Yeah, it is a movie that is awkwardly almost 10 years old, and I just stumbled upon it. You can watch it on Netflix, and it's based on a book that is investigative journalism by Eric Schlosser, and the book is named the same thing, Fast Food Nation, and it goes into the nitty-gritty details that is surrounding the existence of major fast food chains. We're talking about McDonald's and the rest of it. And what happened is that they couldn't really make a documentary out of that book, even if the writer actually wanted that. But instead, a movie was made, which is what I find so fascinating about this movie is that it's not your regular Hollywood flick. It actually contains a lot of facts that, from my perspective, many more directors should use as a formula to not only entertain and engage you into a series of stories that are surrounding the existence of this fast food restaurant that, for the sake of the movie as a fictional story, it is called Mikey's. Oh, Mickey's. So we will, not Mikey's. So we will be discussing about Mickey's, but it's just like the equivalent to McDonald's, Burger King, and so forth. And really make it a sort of an awareness and a consciousness type of movie, making consciousness about what goes behind the creation of fast food, the lives of the people working in there, and really how it has become part of our culture. That's why the name is Fast Food Nation. What is it within ourselves as consumers that has enabled the existence of fast food restaurants? So we will be discussing about these various lives that are shown in the movie, along with the facts, and discussing more on where we stand within it all.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I found the movie to be quite interesting, just how it took you right from the very beginning, showing the immigrant perspective from basically the Mexicans at the border and crossing the border illegally to get into the United States, because that's a very real thing that happens. And you didn't really know what was going or what the point of it was, but then you soon see after that there's a whole process set up to get them in. Of course, this is like a business in and of itself, the Mexicans getting into the United States illegally, and then them basically being directly connected to labor through the Mickey's Corporation. And you see right then and there, they take their pick of guys to do this job, that job. And you see that, okay, what they're doing, you know, it's not so pretty. It's not necessarily the standards of somebody who was a United States citizen might actually do themselves, because the protocols that would have to be abided by, uh, could easily be missed. It's kind of like, well, it's set up so that the labor is under the table kind of thing. Like there's no real accounting behind it, even though it's a big corporation. And you see early on in one of the scenes, the workers talking like to their friends who aren't working for them yet, that are maybe considering it, like, yeah, I did all this awful stuff. It was pretty bad. I could have really got hurt or burned or whatnot. But look at this. I made $80 today. And for someone coming from Mexico, where there's a lot of poor jobs and whatnot, a better that was better than what they were getting or seemed to have the opportunity to get from where they live. So it was like, well, yeah, I'll do this. I'll risk my life, do this awful stuff, because look at the pay at the end of it. And kind of from their perspective, thinking like, I'm now pursuing the American dream. I'm going to be able to get my car or whatever. And just really at the low end of the middle class, you could say, possibly, uh, not even quite at the middle class, I would say, in terms of the income level, but still kind of feeling like privileged and, grateful for having this awful job with this awful standards.
Yeah.
What
Even
anything to add?
Yeah, even considering, in Mexico just raised the minimum wage to what is equivalent to around $6 a day. So of course,
Oh
as you're
wow.
saying, getting $10 in this meat factory that is creating all the meat patties for Mickey's, it sounds like a great deal, even if there's been stories of people losing their limbs and chopping their hands because of working in this factory. And one thing that maybe we have to spoil in relation to the movie is what the whole story revolves around, which is what happens with the meat that goes into these hamburgers. So the story also leads you to see the corporate side from a guy that gets to know that there's been an independent research on the meat of these hamburgers. Of course, they are not going to pay for this research. It is someone independent that decides to study what the hell is being eaten by, in this case, America. And they find that there's fecal matter, that's poop, in the meat. And so, from my perspective, of course, I was like immediately shocking, like, oh my God. But if you look at it, it makes sense when you start through the movie looking at the process in which they process the whole meat, from how they kill the cows, the conditions in which all of it happens, which is actually shown in a very direct and blunt manner, which I appreciated in the movie. I thought that they weren't going to go into the nitty gritty, gory details, but it actually becomes more like a documentary, really documenting how these animals are caught up and the fast pace. I mean, if it's fast food, it means that you have to get everything done in a fast pace, and the same applies. The faster it gets, the more the profit, less wages. Everything goes hand in hand, and we never get to see that when you just go to your fast food restaurant, ask for the thing, and it's ready in 2 minutes. So the fascinating thing about this movie is precisely that you get to see the behind the scenes, and in this case, as we were mentioning, how immigrants might not be considered even as part of the picture, but they are the ones working in the very meat processing factory that enables this kind of very cheap meat. So this is kind of like the main plot as well in the movie. And it's very important to recognize that uh, the way that this job is being performed is not only, from my perspective, of course, underpaid. As we were mentioning, it's under the table. It's probably not entirely legal, but there's also the story of these like supervisors type of sexual harassment that goes on with the
Right.
ladies, the immigrants, which is also part of the story, and how real this is. Like, so many people have to comply to what the boss says, and doing sexual stuff because, well, it's a job. I need a job. Otherwise, I would have to be doing maybe a shittier job with less pay. So there's a lot of that considered. And it's very cool that they did go that far in showing that reality as well. What's your take on that?
I totally agree with you. And to add on to that, another angle that was kind of, brought up, and it can relate to so many other industries of how labor exists, is the connection with drug culture. That how, because of the long, working hours or whatnot, or because of the harassment issues like the sexual harassment or whatnot, drugs may play a factor there as some form of like emotional suppression, or as a coping mechanism to just cope with the ridiculous, inhumane work conditions. So there was like various relationship examples you see in the movie play out where people are using hard drugs, and they're doing them in a way to kind of get by, if you will. Like, it's they do, you see in those instances that the people do realize like they're fucked up. They're, pardon my frankness, they're not in a good place, but they're doing it anyways to just kind of go through the motions or make it easier to get through the day and whatnot. And it's a very real part of our society. I mean, it's, what I found to be interesting about that also is just even within the immigrants, there's some dialogue which showcases like the point of basically seeing initial judgments of people making a bad decision or doing something bad, but then kind of coming, to the conclusion that there's a lot of dimensions here at play, and to just simply point the finger and blame them isn't productive or really considering all the things that are going on within them that have led them to that point and where they are. And so in one of the relationships in the movie between two friends that are girls, it was like the one girl really didn't consider to the extent that she was being sexually abused and she was using drugs in that time and kind of coping with it. And it was only later after where she kind of has a heart to heart with her, realizes like, look, who am I to judge you or what's going on in your life? I don't know all the angles. So for me to pinpoint and just take a few specific angles of your life without considering the whole picture of who you are, that's very inconsiderate. And I found that to be rather cool, to just really take like a step back basically on, the initial judgments and the finger pointing, which is, so regarded as blame, and, say like, there's a lot of factors here making this the way it is. And to transition from that kind of point consideration, uh, that kind of perspective and kind of like reflecting back, I found it was done when you move to, let's say the lower middle class workers who are working out of the factory, but into the fast food restaurant, like the young teenagers or whatnot who come from maybe not the so well-to-do home, so that they don't have, well, basically they have to work because their parents don't make that much money, and so they have to take the crap job or whatnot, or they're encouraged to just get whatever job they can, and they get those jobs because those jobs are quick and easy to get. Ironically, just like the restaurant, the food, it's quick and easy to get. So is the job. And we see the one girl who's like the cashier in the movie, that how basically that's why she took that job, because it was quick, easy. She needed a job. You see her mother works like a retail job also, maybe slightly better. She gets to work with animals. But again, we see the same kind of conditions, that the animals have like brutal conditions, and it's about like a quick sale to the customers, not really a regard. Make the living conditions for the animals look slightly bad so you feel sorry for them, but not too sorry for them so you want to support that store and take the animal out of there. And the beat goes on. And then you see how one of the girl's friends, who's the cashier at the Mickey's, she's like, "Why would you work like there?" Like, and she's working at another retail store, which is pretty bad, but the quality of the slave labor, you could say, as like the goods are slightly like nicer. So there's the appearance of like, oh, this is like a more elitist place to work, as she's working at, I believe it was referred to, it was Banana Republic,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
which sells slightly, like nicer clothes. They're not seen as the lower end. They cost a bit more, but the facts of the matter is that they're coming from basically the slave labor type conditions as well. But that was seen as like a better place to go. What's
Yeah, this is something that within this whole notion of the American dream and what is acceptable and what is not. The Mac jobs, as they had been described for quite a few years now, are always seen as you say, the most immediate way to make money. And when you see, for example, that throughout the movie, you also see the evolution of these characters that start questioning their own jobs at Mickey's. So, for example, they start hearing that, there's a lot of money in the registration machine. What is it?
right? You have a few of the male employees. Well,
Yeah,
I even heard the female. They start talking basically about how there's been robberies at several of the fast food outlets because they deal in cash. Most people who buy the fast food, it's quick, quick, and they're exchanging cash. They're not using their credit cards so often. And so it was talked about a robbery that happened where it was like a quick, easy pull of like $6,000. And now these guys are thinking like, screw our employer. They don't give a rat's ass about us. Like they're awful. Maybe we could pull a heist too. Just kind of like, screw these guys. let's take the money, we're owed it. Basically feeling victimized within the position they're in, needing the money, doing it, thinking their job is a joke, it is bullshit, but being kind of, they need it or whatever. Like they don't know what to do, kind of in a disempowered situation, but basically turning to crime as a viable solution so they don't have to do the shitty work.
Which they
And
actually don't get to do. I thought that they were going to do it, that they were
me,
actually going to portray the whole robbery situation,
yes,
but
yes,
it
me
didn't
too.
happen.
No,
Uh, and instead,
or
what we see is that, the cashier, this lady starts like really pondering about her job there. And then there's the situation of the youngsters, environmentally friendly type of awareness that emerges in these guys, that this lady cashier gets to be part of, and start questioning, like, have you seen how the animals are treated in the meat factory? And have you seen the conditions? And they start talking about resources. So there's like this level of waking up also in the youngsters in the movie, that leads, of course, the cashier to say, well, what can I do? What can we do to create a solution? Because it is a corporation. So the whole activism versus the corporate side starts emerging. And they get to a very blunt type of idea that comes from this cashier girl, which is, how about if we just free the cows and they will be running free, and they will escape all the suffering, which sounds good to all of these guys, like, yeah, let's rebel that way. And they actually carry out the whole thing, and it happens that actually the cows weren't even able to run away, because that's all that they've known. And they
they, yeah,
they stick in their own pack, and even if they cut down the fences and so forth, they don't really even escape. So of course what is missed out there is that that's just like handling consequence. What would be really looking at the solution is changing the whole culture of eating fast food, to precisely making this kind of movies that create an awareness of how your Big Mac is created, so that you make really like sane decisions of what industry you want to continue supporting.
yeah, that point and example is kind of interesting because they were looking for a solution that would be like instant, ironic, like the fast food nation, just like quick to the point, large impact, huge change. And when we like what we have to consider, that anything that's really great, it's a slow process. It's not going to be abracadabra waloo kind of thing, like it's totally done. And so I think that was kind of a cool example within that. And then also, the mention came up of basically touching on the ridiculousness of the laws and how they exist now. That basically in the United States, there's so many ways in which you could be charged with terrorism, basically against the state, for calling out such corporate behavior, if you will, to put it.
Or trespassing private property and all of these things that they have to always consider.
Yes, yes. So that, basically going about it from a way of starting point way of conflict, as like got to fight the system, is not the way to go. And the movie didn't really take that turn where, it would look like, oh, they might get caught. Maybe just the girl's going to get caught. And basically, I think it showed you just enough with the considerations of what they were talking about earlier with the way the laws are, is that if her to get caught, have been caught trespassing on the private property, she had ambitions to go to school to be study aeronautical engineering. That's like basically becoming an astronaut. All of that would have been kiboshed totally. That if you have this record, you're not going to get into this like special sophisticated program, which is kind of like an elitist program within the arenas of education. So really just, yeah, kind of gave you a glimpse of like, whoa, like, cross these boundaries, there's going to be serious consequences that could, stem over into your later years of your life.
That's a
Yeah.
really great point, because within this whole culture of fast food and all of these fast-paced things, what is more prevalent is this kind of easy jobs to take, and there is really no such kind of jobs that could be more in the environmental volunteering, work that actually supports the community. None of that is really well paid. So that is also showing that only what's profitable is what's essentially run by major corporations, because we, the society, decide to make that the trend. So, as you're saying, the lives of these people could be transformed if there were not only more options in terms of what kind of jobs to take, but also the kind of wages that they could take, the kind of education that they could get, the kind of, as well, the kind of decisions that they could make to eat. And if we look at also from the side of the corporate guys, which are also shown in the movie, and actually we follow the marketing guy from Mickey's, the one that comes up with the name the big one or something like that, the trendy jingles, the nice images that make it very nice for people to be attracted to and consume. And he's the one that goes to this meat factory to see the conditions and starts following the trend of the people around it. And there's the gullibility, like this character represents the gullibility aspect, where you're working at the corporate level, you have no idea of what you're selling, yet you're selling it because, hey, you make great money. So it is also quite fascinating how one goes walking with him, like he's very disingenuous about the whole reality of the thing. And he actually even continues eating the same hamburgers, even if he gets to know that there's actually, fecal matter in them. And I was like astounded, like, how come he still goes to eat there? Didn't you find that odd as well?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's funny because it just made, me even reflect on myself that, like, well, once in a while I would eat fast food, and it's kind of like everybody knows it's not good, or it's low end, but once in a while it's like, and you do it anyways because it's quick, and maybe it's awful from a substance point or what's possibly in it, but from like a taste point, well, it tastes pretty good. Like, as you see in the movie, it's showcasing, like, it's specifically engineered to hit like all those taste buds flavors specifically. So it's, basically it can scramble your mind from the perspective that, like, the way it's tasting and coming across is that you think it's actually better than it is, or there's been marketing or whatever around it for you to believe that even though you're going to a fast food, there's like healthier choices at it, or maybe if you get this but you don't get the soda, it's okay. Like, he got like the milkshake with it. you know that's a big thing in culture too, at least in North America, is that, like, milk is very good for you, and there's documentaries that showcase that, maybe that's a point of questioning as well, that the milk you drink is maybe not so good for you either. But that's like a topic in and of itself for another day. um,
I'd also like to add on what has been happening also in the fast food trend, with all of the documentaries like Super Size Me and Food Inc. and Cowspiracy. Many documentaries that people are actually getting to thanks to things like Netflix, actually, including this movie. There's been a change in the trend of people's perception about fast food. I don't know if you ever got to see these pink substance that was running around as the picture of what was in the McNuggets or the hamburger, something like that in McDonald's. And that became such a disgusting thing to look at that many people started actually stopping going there, including myself. I haven't eaten there in probably over a decade, for example. And this is actually now affecting McDonald's. They're actually closing places. They're not getting as much revenue. So that defines that we, the consumer, can actually change the trend in which this kind of food industry goes to. And they're actually, as you were mentioning, introducing like healthier options. And my take is that, closing down even the McDonald's is not the solution, or any other fast food restaurant for that matter. There's a ton of people involved behind it, including the immigrants, including these youngsters, all of them. If you close that down, it will be a less source of jobs for now. So what
Right.
has to be conducted is a change in the industry, which actually happens by us, the consumers, demanding healthier choices. Like, I won't buy the Big Mac. I will buy a salad that I know is being produced with locally grown vegetables and, maybe juices instead of sodas and things like that. And so we change the trend according to how we inform ourselves and decide to make better choices of what to eat. What's your take?
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's nice and well to say like, okay, cut it out altogether, boycott this, that. And I mean, we are seeing some of that. People are making those considerations of like, what am I really putting into me here? Like maybe instead of just going for the McDonald's, the fast food, there is some already better options that exist out there. Like for instance, maybe if I just go to the grocery store and go into the produce section, and get some fruits. I mean, fruits are fast food, relatively speaking. I mean, you don't, you go in and you pick it out of the produce section, and voila, there it is. So uh, I think we are seeing more and more things like that, and I think because of those considerations happening, that's why we're seeing these healthier choices coming to places like McDonald's, because they realize, okay, people want to actually have a better option. So if we don't start giving them the better option, we're going to lose all our business and whatnot. So I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing the transition, because basically it's a sort of democracy in and as like the consumer, that really the consumers are that point in democracy. And I think sometimes maybe we forget about that, or don't really see our own empowerment in how we spend our money. Like it's kind of ironic because we're spending it all the time the way our society exists as a consumerist society. So these movies and these documentaries opening up consideration in such ways are good on a lot of levels, and just also the point of we have a lot of creative potential in the choices we make in how we decide to eat. I mean, obviously there's other dimensions involved as well in terms of economics.
Exactly. Money is one factor. I mean, most of the people that earn low wages, that have very little time to eat, what do they resort to? They just go to the McD and get their hamburger in and out and go back to work. So imagine a society that is mostly ingesting fast food and drugs to do well in work and perform well. Where are we taking ourselves to? This also deviates into bad health conditions that eventually then the system has to absorb, and then there's the drugs to treat the illness. So it's a very vicious cycle. Not we also have to consider the whole point of animal abuse and the ways in which animals are being slaughtered, and that is actually shown in the movie, as we said before. We usually only take a look at human rights and good labor conditions, but what about better ways in which they can be slaughtered in a way that is more humane, that is less painful, that they don't get to suffer as much? And also the rate in which they are killed, and how they're grown many times with hormones, antibiotics and whatnot. All of these should be considered, and ultimately it goes down once again to the consumer, because the more there's this crave for meat, there's a lot of that goes involved in not only the creation, growing animals and so forth for that, but the outflows of that. There's a lot of pollution that goes with it, and we don't consider that when you just pay $2-3 for your burger. So what's your take on that?
Totally. It's like the quality, the standards are so low that you could eat like 5 of these burgers, or people get because they're like the 99-cent burgers, or they show that in the movie. There's like these different ones where even the kids, they get like 3 of these little burgers or whatnot. So just kind of encouraging that gluttonous point, that you, because this food isn't really so substantial, you need to eat more of it, and it's like filled with crap, and it's kind of like an overload of crap that way. Where it brings up for me the point of like local, like the meat being local and whatnot. And if like the livestock is basically taken care of well, and then it's given away, you're gonna have a better end result. Like basically the sustenance you're gonna get from the meat is gonna be more quality with a small amount or whatnot. Um, the
It's
amount.
also shown, sorry to interrupt, but where
Okay.
Bruce Willis appears, which is the guy that kind of created the deal with the meat factory and Mickey's. They're eating at a restaurant. They're getting a burger that is obviously far more expensive than one at Mickey's, and he knows that he's only going to eat that, even if he's promoting and advocating the other meat factory for Mickey's, because he knows that it is probably better meat that has come from better livestock and so forth. So it also shows that the choice actually comes with money. So imagine if people had more money, more awareness, more education on what goes into cheap food. Of course, you will make better decisions because no one really wants to, have this kind of surprises in your food. I mean, there's been stories in McDonald's of how there's been rats and whatnot found in the meat of these hamburgers. So this is also just showing how it is really like an economic problem in terms of who can afford the good food, and how the deals that are done by these people, they're not even backing their own product or the kind of factory that they advocate. They know what's going on. And we also go to the character, this ranch guy that has had a lot of livestock, that has like the real straightforward talk with the marketing guy, and that calls his servant, who is an immigrant, and says, oh yeah, my brother has worked in that meat factory for a long time, and everyone knows that there's shit in the meat. It's just how it is. It's just how it's always been. So for ourselves as a viewer, it also places you in the point of, wow, maybe this is just the norm and I'm not even aware of. What's your take on that?
Totally. It reminds me just like of the point, and somebody was mentioning this to me the other day, and just talking basically about globalization and the way things are in the world, is that to a certain extent, everybody knows things are messed up, and you could point it at this way, that way, that way, so many different tangible examples. It's just like, wow, what do you do? It's like everybody knows, but it's kind of like, at the same time, because of how we exist in our movement here, in our relationships, like we're so busy trying to make whatever, basically survive, whether you're in the high end job or the low end job, just basically trying to keep your job so that you keep the money train coming in, or get a better money train coming in wherever your role is in this kind of conglomerate uh, game. It's kind of like, well, don't really have a lot of extra time, so to speak, and it's almost like the abdication. Well, it's the abdication of responsibility on that, as like, well, I already do all this other work. I'm so exhausted from doing this other work. Maybe the person's even on drugs while they're doing their job, and so they're just so tired, so stressed out, so weakened that they're basically totally ineffective to do anything else, or so that's the experience they're existing within themselves, and looking around and not seeing anybody else necessarily being an example in their immediate environment, and just kind of being in that disempowered state of going with the motions of like you're saying, wow, that's just the way it is. It's always the way it is. If you have a good spot in this lot, be grateful and happy, and just make the best of it. Go on vacation, try to buy nice things, and really enjoy that, your spot in this lot that's kind of a mess is better than others who have it worse than you, instead of kind of seeing like, wait a second, what can be done, how can we move, kind of thing. Just because it's like the democracy point, that the vote of like what's popular to do as an expression or as like a lifestyle point to take on for yourself, as like becoming a writer or a journalist also in your spare time to engage about these things, like activist like pursuits, and just basically taking on a point and engaging it because it's something you're interested in and you're passionate about. um, I don't think we've hit the tipping point in our society as a global culture where basically, that's kind of like taking over. That's still a very minute point, I think, even considering following your purpose in life, of like what's an area in this world that really interests you, and how can you take responsibility to look at the other relationships connected to your specific point of interest, and how you can be a direct force for change for the betterment of the future by basically enacting yourself to authorize the living of a higher purpose, if you will.
Yeah, and this is where the notion of really how can we kind of equalize the playing field in really giving people the choice not only to eat better, but to also choose what they want to spend their time and effort on. So, yeah, the notion of giving a basic income and a living income ultimately is what can be that. Free choice giving type of card for everyone to then say, well, if I want to become an investigative journalist, just like the guy that made this book possible, and really dive into one field and come up with this research, and maybe making a deal with someone from Hollywood to create this kind of movies. If more of this is shown, then, as you're saying, the culture will start shifting from the usual values, the usual ideas of what success is, and rather start recognizing the work of people that do this kind of movies, this kind of research, that are really interested in educating people about what matters and how we can change the system. Because ultimately, this is a movie that shows precisely the interdependence between all of the people involved around the existence of this fast food restaurant. And if you look at the end, what happens is that even if they realize that, yes, that is a fact, there is shit in the meat, they still keep doing business as usual. They revamp a new flavor, barbecue, whatever, and people will buy it. As long as people do not take the time to precisely watch these kind of movies and have the time for it, have the resources for it, it will not happen. So along with providing money to people, time to people, there is a willingness to want to know as well, to kind of go into this self-education. What do you say?
Absolutely. I think that's very much an integral point, is that willingness to want to know, to want to learn, to basically it to put it simply, it's like a childhood curiosity point where you're curious, you want to know how this works, why this is, like why, about everything, because you're here and you want to understand, know everything that's here, like as you, or to a certain degree, within a particular area. um, and I think this is where the passion point comes in, is in just kind of like the interest, as and I think this reflects and relates also to, as an individual really regards and takes themselves seriously, like as a value point of life regard, self regard, that you can really actually have regard for others as well, because it kind of reflects one and the same, that, I'm not just living here alone in my own isolated bubble, that it, it all relates. Like this earth, we're all living on it. It's a shared, bubble that everybody is in, kind of thing. And who's going to, decide how the bubble exists, if you will, as like the playground, but us. And then I see that just kind of being the outflow of how, in fact, we can practically be custodians for this earth, is through that basically taking ownership for being here and saying, like, this is what I think is cool, this is how I see things are existing, and engaging the dialogue on that point to see, like, well, this is problematic the way things are going here. These are solutions that I see are viable, and like this movie basically is a cool example of that, It's basically putting out there and engaging information about particular things, because I mean, really, it's the movement of information about particular points that make change, whether the change is good or the change is bad, or there's something new created or there's something else destroyed. It's the movement of information about things. And so basically taking a stand, to be a sound body of information, if you will, that stands and is rooted in and as principles that are, most excellent, most awesome for everybody in all ways. And I mean, if we think about everything we're doing on a daily basis, anyways, we're basically moving around as like, bits of information in different capacities, because wherever you go, you're participating in something. You're watching something, you're doing something, you're sharing in something, all these different ways. And so there's all these opportunities within all the participations we're engaged in already to, expand the dialogue, question, and look at how we can fine tune for the betterment of all. And really, right now, we're at a point where fine tuning is such an easy thing to do because if you look around, there's so many areas that could be improved in ways that are more awesome.
Yeah, we're
And
definitely in this
yeah,
era of information and social media. What we're doing right now in this Hangout is precisely doing that and taking what is shown in the movie into another level, which is looking at solutions. What can be done about it? Looking at ourselves as consumers, looking at the trends of what is already going on in terms of fast food. And this is just one aspect of our reality that if we kind of revamp this kind of movies as well, if you guys as viewers have any other movie that is in a similar vein in terms of really looking at facts and creating it in a movie, it's very cool to bring them back into discussion, even if this is after 10 years, to precisely kind of make it a hype so that people start questioning it again. And it's really about what we decide to place our focus and attention on. And the movie is not really only like a documentary, it's also very entertaining. The lives, the development of characters is actually very well done. And this is the kind of movies that I would suggest as, perfect type of entertainment and really something worthy of getting your dollars for a movie theater night, for example.
totally. I totally agree with that. I mean, when you first suggested this movie to me, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like fast food is like bad. Don't eat it. Like, look at it. It's so awful. I was really surprised. I mean, I also thought, okay, this is just a documentary and it's very narrow in its focus. But this totally was not that. Like, it opened up so many different relationship dimensions and the process involved. And yeah, it was entertaining. And it's based on, like factual stuff. Like, yes, they changed the narrative around a little bit for like legal purposes, like making up a fictional restaurant, which, sort of mimics McDonald's or the other big chain restaurants, and just the various parts that it played in it. There's so many stories like that are real things that go into, the points of this world that's really cool. Like, it doesn't have to be, like the kind of, the make believe story of the bang bang shoot 'em up bad guy versus good guy. Oh, good guy wins in the end. He kills the bad guy. Movie that, is not very substantial in its dialogue, the word exchange back and forth. I mean, that's basically pointing that out. Even is just kind of like a point of regard that there's so much information we have access to here. It's really a disservice for a movie these days to just be special effects and, explosions, like lights, action, camera, like that's all it is, without really having an expansive dialogue to go along with it. Which really, it showcases the point of like how even within, Hollywood entertainment, for the most part, you could say we as consumers are basically showcasing how we've been kind of devaluing ourselves in terms of like what we would like as the best forms. And it's kind of ironic because I think there's a number of people, I've engaged and talked to that said like, oh yeah, like, movies these days are pretty crap. And it's just kind of accepted that it's crap, kind of like the fast food point. but yet, you still go to the show. It's like, oh, well, there's nothing else to watch, so I'm going to watch this crap anyways. Just like the food, like, oh, well, not realizing that, maybe we can be on that point, or we can stimulate it, or engaging with others, connecting with others. Like, what's to stopping anyone from writing a movie script? Yeah, maybe it'll take time, but, chances are if it does take a long while to do it, and it's not a rush thing, it might actually be pretty good as a result. Um, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it is a nice way to also create a bridge between the audience that would only go watch documentaries. I include myself in there, and finding this kind of moving was extremely refreshing, really. And I regularly don't watch many movies, and some of those that I like are the ones that really question reality. And this is the kind of entertainment that I would like to watch. And I think that we've covered the whole lot for now. What do you say?
Yeah, I think so as well. It again, just to wrap it up, it movie was quite awesome, and really just like showcasing the globalization of what's going on here, and considering people at different ends of the spectrum. And anybody who hasn't watched the movie yet, I definitely implore you to check it out. And I agree with everything that you said here today, Marlon. And it was a pleasure having you on, and hope to have you on again.
Likewise. Yeah, very cool discussion. And thank you for inviting me as well.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Until next time, and remember. Oh, we have a question here. Just sorry before we wrap up. For those, I didn't mention it on today's Hangout, but always the point is opened up. Didn't open up till later on in the Hangout today, but we have a Q&A basically where anyone who's tuning in live has the opportunity to ask questions. And the question coming in here is, hey, I want to enter in your circle. Cool. Well, there will be some links attached, like Desteni links attached, as that's what we're coming around here as the basis of this movie Hangout. And it's a group that anyone's invited to take part within. And so, yeah, really, it's a point of self-inclusion, and it's all just about basically what we're talking about here today, talking about real topics and real solutions, and it is for everyone. And so, I think actually when I posted the link for the Hangout today, I did not have the links added. So if you give me a few moments after the Hangout finishes airing, I will add the links onto the Hangout. Thank you for your question. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Marlon.
You're
And
welcome.
we will be back again next Friday. The movie for next Friday will be Joy, Joy, Joy. I believe it's still out in the theaters right now, and we will have at least one guest next week. Anna will be joining us, for those who may know who Anna is in the internet space. Yeah, I look forward to having her on. Uh,
Absolutely.
okay, everybody, that's it for now. See you next week. Thanks, Marlon.
Bye.